It's a good boy. What a good boy.
He's the only one of them with a brain cell, really.
Yeah, and he's only got one.
I think he's got 1.5. Maybe come on.
He's just round the corner.
If he goes up, Benji takes off and goes across the reservoir.
Yes, he still may do that today. Daisy? Duck those out and eat them. Step in the right direction, I suppose.
Come on, Maisie, looking for the steps. Look at her, bless her. She's gone wet underneath.
I'm here with Sally Gardner in Breed High Woods. Hello, Sally.
Hello, Tony.
And we've been walking through the woods and done a little bit of filming of the animals enjoying themselves and the animals' owners enjoying themselves, as you've heard. Always plenty of laughs and jokes with other people. That's one of the things you love so much about coming here, isn't it, Sally?
Yes, we've just banished Roe, of course. He's gone down to the dogs. Get them out of the way quick.
But for all the people that have read your books and are interested in your books, animals are something that are very, very dear to you in your personal life.
Yes, enormously important. They really are. Always have been, really. My grandmother was one of the ladies who helped to found PDSA, and she always had a house full of cats, mainly cats, but also dogs. She's got all the cats' tiddles. They were all rescued. She was rescuing animals long before people knew that they needed rescuing. And I guess I've just gone on doing it, really. I haven't got quite as many as her, though.
Because you actually got involved with a lot of those kind of charities yourself, and you've rescued numerous animals from and given them a good home.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, here's one of them now. Blue, come and sit by Mummy. Blue, come and sit by Mummy. Good boy, sit. Oh, goodness, he sat. He has probably half a brain cell more than the others. He is a border collie. No, darling, please. Sorry about this. Yes, I was a volunteer for Cat Call, which was a local charity. I ran their lost and found line for some time. Also, of course, I ran a cattery myself for a number of years. Now for something completely different at one point in my life, and gave up acting, theatre, all the stuff that had been important, and moved to the country, started up a cattery. Had a wonderful 10 years doing that, actually. So working with animals, having animals, loving animals, terribly important in my life. And I know it comes through in my book. How can I write without mentioning that? I'm sorry about Blue. He's lovely, really.
So here we are, Sally, in another wonderful part of this beautiful place, and you've just been telling me about one of the benches you're sitting on, and that all the benches are dedicated to people. I noticed that particular one was dedicated to a lady called Kim, who the plaque describes as a remarkable woman, and that kind of started me thinking about your own connection to remarkable women and of the book The Sweetest Empire. Remarkable women seem to feature very much in your affections.
Well, yes, I think that's right. You know, because I'm old enough to remember that you just, you know, if you didn't have a man in your life, you couldn't set up a bank account, you couldn't do all sorts of things. And so the women's movement was very, very important to me. And yes, I grew up in a totally female environment. I didn't know my grandfather. My father was, he died as a result of the Second World War. When I was born, he was in a prisoner of war camp, and he came back. I saw him just for 2 days. He was dying of tuberculosis, and then he went into the sanatorium, and I never saw him again. So I was an only child, my mother was an only child, my grandmother was an only child. I come from a long line of women. So to write about women has come naturally to me, and also because I have felt very strongly about the struggles that women have had and are still having to be recognised equally with men. It just seems absurd. You know, we've all got brains, we've all got capacity to do things, and yet all over the world so many women are still regarded as second-class citizens or even third-class citizens in some cultures. You can tell I feel strongly.
Yeah.
The Sweetest Empire, you're right, that is specifically about the journey of women from Victorian times perhaps to the 60s.
So, Sally, this is where you live.
Yes, this is where we live with the dogs and all the cats, of course, as you can see. It's sort of quite an old house, really, over 100 years old, and we love it, really. A lot of the things in it are as old as the house, because I'm an only child of an only child of an only child, so I've inherited quite a lot of furniture and things that are quite precious to me, and somehow they feel right in this house.
It seems, you know, looking around the room myself, it seems like a room where everything is where it is for a particular reason. It's almost as if you've kind of particularly stored certain memories in certain areas of the room, some things to be looked at directly every day and other things perhaps to be kind of there in the background but not perhaps in the forefront of your mind. Would that be an accurate description?
I think it's very perceptive. I think perhaps that's the kind of thing. Yes, I think it is true, but I don't think it's a conscious thing that you do. I think it's something that it just happens, and when somebody does something like that, you think, yeah, right, actually, yes, I think you're right.
Because I was, you know, I've one of the things that strikes me as someone that's read some of your books is how well drawn and how clearly defined the characters in your books are. And you know, now you talk about your father and not knowing your father, I do wonder whether perhaps because you didn't know your father, you have a greater need than other people to kind of clearly define people so that you do know exactly everything about them. And would you say that that inspiration, would you say that has anything to do with the characters in your books?
I think my childhood and my lack of a father has probably coloured everything that I write. I think you are very right about that. Though I don't remember particularly missing a father when I was growing up, because there was my mother and I, and that was where it was. Other people had fathers, but they didn't really impinge on me much. It's only as I got older, as I had children of my own and I saw them with their father, that I sort of realised I really missed something here, and I think I've worked that out a lot in my novels. Yes, I think you're absolutely right. Coloured them a lot, particularly perhaps painted by numbers.
Because your mother had was it a guest house in Brighton?
Yes.
And from some of the things you've told me off camera, you know, you had quite a tough upbringing at times, and a very female-dominated environment all round. So that's another thing that's kind of caught a chord with me, especially to do with your book about the emancipation of women, The Sweetest Empire. And do you feel that your mother and the struggles that she had inspired you in that direction?
I think my mother, yes, a lot really, because my mother was a highly intelligent woman who actually thought she shouldn't show that she was intelligent because it was unfeminine. She was very much a person of her generation. She was an older mother. She was nearly 40, which in those days was quite old to have a first child, and you know, sadly, my father did not see me growing up. My mother had to bring me up on her own, and it never occurred to her that she could do anything other, really, than relatively menial jobs. She was a dinner lady. She had a war widow's pension, but it was pittance. Didn't even pay the rent. She was a dinner lady, and then she started to do bed and breakfast, and then she had this idea she could do more. And in actual fact, she ran a very successful small hotel in the end. But she could have done a lot more. She was a very bright lady.
There's a lot of trauma and a lot of emotion, and a lot of very poignant and touching scenes in a lot of your books. From a kind of an outsider's point of view, I wonder whether you feel that your own life has had a lot of trauma in it, and is this the artist's way of cathartically writing about someone else, but actually putting some of themselves between the pages?
Well, I suppose the short answer to that would be yes, really. You know, my first husband died of cancer after a long illness. Nursed my mother for 3 years after she had a stroke, and my mother-in-law for nearly as long when she was ill, my first mother-in-law. Yes, you learn a lot, really, don't you? What more can I say?
It seems actually, you know, to hear you say that, it seems to me that perhaps the writer that was suppressed for so many years within Sally Gardner, and had to compete with the Sally Gardner that had to be there for other people. Do you think that perhaps your writing gives you a chance to actually voice? It actually gives Sally Gardner a voice of her own.
Well, I think that's true, but I have to confess I've never really been a sort of retiring flower. I think I've always had a voice, but I think writing has enabled me perhaps to explore those other parts of me. I think I'm rather a bossy person, but then you knew that, didn't you?
I wasn't going to be the one that said it, especially when I'm only about 6 feet away. And I think actually I've subjugated a lot of this stuff. I've used it in acting, and I've used it in various things like that. But I think I've really perhaps explored my own past and the things that have made me what I am in writing the novels and the occasional short story. I think you are very, very right. Do you think as well, though, that perhaps a side effect of the, as you so called yourself, the bossy side, do you think that is maybe down to a fact that there's a certain insecurity about things when you don't know exactly what's going to happen, and perhaps by being in control of the situation it allows you to feel a little bit more comfortable?
Yes, I can't bear not being in charge. There's honesty for you. Good girl. Girl. You don't get on me because I've got black trousers on. That's what you need for the white cat.
Into the garden now, and yet another animal.
This is Dodie.
Named after Princess Diana's other half, or just...
No, when we got her from the rescue centre, she was called Beryl, and somehow it just didn't seem like, or Bertha or something like that. Poor girl. But she's got beautiful green eyes. Turn round, Dodie. And I said they're like periwigs. So Dodie. I know.
There she is.
Good girl.
So, Sally, I suppose I ought to ask you the golden question of how you got into writing in the first place.
Well, that is an interesting question. I suppose it's quite a long story, really, because, as you know, I was with a travelling repertory company for some time, with the wonderful Glenn Gambin. And occasionally I used to write plays for it, because you don't have to pay royalty on the stuff you written yourself. And then, you know, I rather tore out my theatrical life and did something completely different, and I ran a cattery for 10 years. And when I stopped doing that, I think word got around that I was sort of available. And I had a call from the chap who was running St Mary in the Castle in Hastings at the time. And he asked me if I could write and produce something to make some money for St Mary in the Castle. And it was a challenge, and I accepted it with great alacrity. I had a wonderful time. We got together a cast of 50. We packed the place for the 3 nights. We put this play that I wrote specially for the castle on. And I believe the Friends of St Mary's are still using some of the money actually that we made them, which is lovely. But I also met Alvin, who was one of the stalwarts of Shoreline community writers, and who suggested that Roe and I went along. Roe was writing articles for the local paper at the time, and we went along. I suppose you could say the rest is history, really. I started to write, to join in really as much as anything. It wasn't a very big group then, but just to join in, to show willing. And then one day Frank, one of the members, said to me, "Oh, we're getting together a magazine. Do you think you could write something for us?" And I said, "Well, what sort of thing would you like me to write?" He said, "Well, we've got this cover and it's got icicles on it. So if you could set it in winter, that would be really good." Right, that's a pretty wide brief, you know. And I remember my mother-in-law had told me the story about how when she was a child, in the winter they used to rub their chests with goose grease and then sew them into Liberty bodices. And I thought I'd write an article about that. So I set my story in January 1900, simply so I'd remember the date really. And I started to write, and I read it to Shoreline because basically I wrote the article and then I went on and on and on, and 6 months and 100,000 words later I came up for air and realised I'd written a novel.
And that turned out to be Lillian's Story, your first published novel.
The 20th century, that's right, which has just done so well. Very great thrill getting it published. And yes, it's still doing enormously well in libraries. I think it's actually out of print now, but there's still a large print copy available. And of course it's available on digital. But yes, that's where it all began. So, and I'm now chair of Shoreline Community Writers. So that's a plug for anybody local.
They liked your book so much they actually got you to run the organisation.
I'm afraid so, yes. But I have to say it's been wonderful in my life, not only inspirational, but I've made some wonderful friends through it as well. So, yes.